1,000-word paragraph. The noon sun hung like a burning coin above Dead Man's Crossing, spilling white heat across the wooden street as folks gathered in silence, their boots scraping dust that rose in lazy spirals. They had seen many cruel things in that town, duels, hangings, drunken brawls, but never anything like what Marshal Grenton had ordered that morning. At the center of the street stood a young woman with long, dark river-like hair flowing over a fringed buckskin dress, her wrists loosely bound not as a restraint, but as a symbol of subjugation, meant to humiliate her tribe. Her name was Kalina, daughter of the Eagle Wind clan, known for her unbreakable spirit and healing knowledge, and the marshal had taken her captive. After a staged skirmish meant only to justify his violence, now she stood tall and silent, refusing to bow her head even as the marshal strutted nearby with a prideful smirk, declaring to the crowd that he would offer her for half price to anyone looking for a servant, scout, or whatever else they had a mind for, his voice dripping with the swagger of a man, convinced nobody would dare challenge him. Behind her, men leaned on the saloon railings, cowhands, ranchers, travelers, each of them avoiding her eyes, not out of apathy but from the deep fear that opposing the marshal meant a shallow grave or a missing family member. The whole town understood what was really at stake. This wasn't an auction but a warning. See what happens when you cross me, was the message. Beneath every word the marshal spoke, Kalina stood like a carved statue, proud even in the face of humiliation, the sun bronzing her skin as she breathed slow and steady, refusing the marshal the satisfaction of seeing fear. Children peeked from behind skirts. Old men clenched their jaws. Some women whispered prayers. And just when the marshal jeered, "Half price, ain't she worth at least that to someone?" the moment stretched like a taut rope ready to snap. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence was suffocating, heavy, almost sacred. Then a single bootstep cracked the stillness. Every head turned. A lone cowboy, lean, dust-covered, wearing a black hat that cast his eyes in shadow, walked forward from the far end of the street. No one recognized him except the marshal, and recognition darkened his face. This newcomer was Cole Thatcher, a wandering veteran of the border conflicts, a man who'd earned a reputation, not for violence but for doing what was right even when it cost him. He was a man with nothing left to lose but his honor, which made him the most dangerous kind of opponent. Cole stopped beside Kalina, not close enough to startle her, but near enough that she could sense his quiet resolve, and raised his hand slowly, deliberately letting the entire town see his defiance. The marshal barked a bitter laugh. Well, the hero returns. You think you can save her, Thatcher? You think stepping in makes you something? Cole didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on Kalina, and in that brief moment, their gazes met, her silent endurance colliding with his steady promise. It wasn't a romantic spark, but an understanding, a pact between two spirits who recognized injustice, the same way wolves sense a trap. When Cole finally spoke, his voice was calm, steady, almost too soft for the charged moment. "I'll take responsibility for her," he said, choosing words deliberately shaped to avoid giving legitimacy to the marshal's cruelty. "I'll take her into my care and I'll answer for whatever happens." Next, the marshal's jaw twitched. He had expected fear, not courage. "You? A drifter with no land and no allies in this town?" Cole nodded once. "I don't need land to know right from wrong." A murmur spread through the crowd, like wind rippling wheat. People straightened their backs, some daring to hope, others terrified of the marshal's reaction. Grenton spat near Cole's boots. "You want her? Then you fight for her. Sundown, she stays here until then." Kalina's eyes sharpened. She understood the trap instantly. Win or lose, blood would soak the street. She stepped forward despite her bound wrists. "I will not be the cause of more death," she said, her voice soft yet cutting through the air like a blade. Cole shook his head slowly. "You're not the cause?" "He is." The marshal's grin widened as if he'd already declared himself winner. "Sundown, Thatcher. And when you fall, the whole town will remember what happens when someone crosses me." Cole tipped his hat, slightly, not to the marshal, but to Kalina, as if to say, "I'm not leaving you here." The sun moved toward the horizon, the heat fading but the tension tightening like a drum skin. Folks drifted away in uneasy silence, whispering about what sundown might bring. Some prayed for Cole's safety. Others prayed the marshal wouldn't punish them for watching. And Kalina, standing alone once the crowd cleared, tilted her face toward the sky, whispering words of strength to the spirits of her ancestors. She did not know if Cole Thatcher could defeat the marshal. She did not know if the town would intervene. But she knew this. For the first time since her capture, someone had stood up, not because they wanted her, but because they believed in justice. In a world ruled by fear, that sort of courage was worth more than any price the marshal could call out. And as the shadows grew long and blue across the street, the entire town held its breath, waiting for nightfall and for the battle that would decide more than just one woman's fate. 1,000-word paragraph. Sundown bled across the sky like a wound, streaking orange and crimson between the rooftops of Deadman's, crossing as the townsfolk trickled back into the street. Drawn by fear, curiosity, and a flicker of hope, they didn't dare speak aloud. Lanterns flickered to life along the saloon porch, throwing trembling circles of light across the packed dust as the marshal strutted to the center of town, boots heavy with the confidence of a man who'd rigged every fight he ever participated in. He wore his polished pistol low on his hip, handle gleaming like the tooth of some predatory animal, and his deputies positioned themselves around him like wolves guarding a kill. Kalina stood nearby, wrists now unbound but still guarded, watching the scene with eyes that held both fire and calculation. She knew Grenton's kind, the sort of man who believed power was his birthright, and cruelty his privilege. What he didn't understand was that courage had a way of multiplying, and tonight courage had a face, Cole Thatcher. As the last strip of sunlight faded, Cole emerged from the alley where he'd been sharpening his resolve more than his blade. His walk was slow, almost casual, but something in his gait, steady, purposeful, made every conversation die instantly. He wore no armor, no special weapons, only the same dust-worn clothes and a holster that held a revolver far older than the marshal's gleaming steel. But nobody doubted which man had the steadier hand. Cole stepped into the center of the street, the toes of his boots brushing the line where daylight surrendered to lantern glow. He looked not at the marshal but at Kalina first, offering her the kind of nod that said he hadn't come just to fight but to change the story. They were both trapped inside. She returned the nod, her chin lifting with new strength. The marshal coughed dramatically. "Let's not drag this out. You had a chance to walk away. You chose death." Cole shook his head slightly. "I chose justice." Grenton laughed, but it rang hollow. "Justice is whatever I say it is." Before the marshal could finish his boast, a voice from the crowd shouted, "Not tonight it ain't." Head snapped toward the speaker, a stable boy barely old enough to shave, trembling but standing tall. His defiance shocked everyone, especially himself. But it was too late to take it back. The marshal snarled, "Anyone else feel like testing me?" More silence. But this time it wasn't fear. It was waiting, watching. Cole took one step forward, planting his boots firmly. "This ends now, Grenton. You let Kalina go, you step down, and you walk out of this town alive." The marshal's laugh was sharp enough to cut rope. "You got sand, Thatcher. Too bad you ain't got brains." Without warning, he drew. But Cole had been waiting, not for the draw, but for the flinch that would give it away. His revolver flashed in the lantern light, a single shot cracking like thunder. The marshal's gun flew from his hand and skidded across the glancing hit. The crowd gasped, deputies reaching for weapons. But Cole shouted before they could fire, "Anyone draws and he dies." For the first time, the marshal felt real fear. It twisted his face, made his voice tremble. You're gonna kill me over a woman?" Cole's stare was cold. "I'm stopping you from killing a town." Silence. Again, heavy, waiting, and then something remarkable happened. Something no one expected. Kalina stepped forward, positioning herself between Cole and the marshal, not in fear but in judgment. "Grenton," she said, voice steady, "your cruelty ends here. The people of this town are not your possession. Neither am I." Her words hit harder than Cole's bullet. One by one, townsfolk began stepping closer, men, women, even the elderly, forming a loose circle around Cole and Kalina. Not holding weapons, not attacking, just standing, choosing a side. The marshal backed away, eyes darting like a cornered animal. His deputies hesitated, hands hovering over their holsters. But seeing the entire town united froze them. Nobody wanted to die for the marshal's ego. Finally, the marshal spat blood and fury at the ground. This town will regret this. Cole cocked his revolver. No, Marshal. This town will recover from you. Grenton stumbled backward, clutching his wounded wrist, pushing through the crowd until he reached his horse. He rode off into the darkness, shouting threats that shrank with every hoofbeat until they were swallowed. By the desert night, for a long moment nobody spoke. The lanterns flickered in the quiet, their light softening the hard edges of the street. Cole holstered his revolver and exhaled slowly, the tension sliding off him like a heavy coat. Kalina stepped toward him, her eyes bright with pride and gratitude. You risked your life for someone you did not know. Cole shrugged gently. I didn't need to know you to know what was right. She smiled, small, real powerful. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring about the dawn of a new era for Dead Man's Crossing, one without Grenton's shadow. But some lingered just to shake Cole's hand or bow respectfully to Kalina, acknowledging her strength and dignity. As moonlight replaced lantern glow, Cole turned to Kalina. What will you do now? She looked toward the horizon. Return to my people. Help heal the wounds he caused. Perhaps help heal this town too if they allow it. Cole nodded. You'll make this place better just by walking through it. She tilted her head thoughtfully. And you, Cole Thatcher? Will you stay? He looked at the dark sky, weighing the question. Maybe for a while. Maybe long enough to make sure men like him don't come back. Kalina smiled. Then we walk forward together, for now. Here, night settled softly around them as they walked side by side down the street, not as prisoner and savior, but as two souls who had stood against injustice and won. Their shadows stretched long behind them, merging in the lantern light like a promise of a different